A village shrouded in mystery nestled in the heart of the English countryside. The village of Blackmoor lay hidden from the world, its narrow cobbled streets and ivy-clad cottages untouched by time. Surrounded by dense forests and the mist-laden hills beyond, it was a place where the past clung to the present like a shadow, and where the line between reality and rumor blurred with each passing year. The village had long been a haven for those who preferred solitude, its inhabitants bound by a quiet tradition of secrecy, their lives dictated by the unspoken rules of an older, more insular world. At the center of this secluded world stood Blackmoor Manor, a grand estate that had once been the seat of noble lineage before fading into obscurity. Its towering stone walls, now weathered by time, bore the marks of a history steeped in both grandeur and tragedy. The manor's windows, dark and uninviting, reflected the ever-present mist that curled through the village like a ghost. Few dared to enter its halls, and those who did often left with an air of unease, as though they had glimpsed something that should have remained hidden. Within these shadowed halls lived the protagonist, a reclusive figure whose presence in the village was as enigmatic as the manor itself. Known only by the name of Eleanor, she had arrived years ago, her past a mystery even to the villagers, who had long since ceased asking questions. She moved through the village like a specter, her steps measured, her gaze distant. The villagers spoke of her in hushed tones, their words laced with speculation and unease. Once been a woman of great wealth and influence, while others whispered of a darker past, one that had driven her to seek refuge in this forgotten corner of the world. The village itself seemed to breathe in the presence of Eleanor, as though it too was drawn into the web of secrets she had woven. The mist that clung to the hills seemed to deepen when she passed, and the wind carried with it the faintest whisper of something unseen. It was a place where the past never truly faded, where the weight of history pressed upon the present like a heavy shroud. And in this place, where the line between love and obsession blurred, the story of Eleanor was about to unfold. The shadow of obsession, Eleanor had always been a woman of solitude. But even in the quiet of Blackmoor Manor, a certain restlessness had taken root within her. It was not the solitude that unsettled her, nor the silence of the village that had long since forgotten the sound of laughter. No, it was the presence of another, someone whose existence had begun to intrude upon the carefully constructed walls of her isolation. His name was Thomas Wren, a man who had once been a mere figure on the periphery of her life, a distant presence in the village that had, until now, held no significance. But now he occupied her thoughts with an intensity that defied reason. She had first seen him on the outskirts of the village, standing at the edge of the forest, his silhouette outlined against the pale morning light. He had been watching her, she was certain of it, though he had not looked directly at her. His presence had been like a whisper in the back of her mind, a voice that she could not ignore. And so she had followed him, drawn by an inexplicable pull that she could not explain. She had watched him from the shadows, noting the way he moved with quiet precision, the way his gaze lingered on the manor as though he were searching for something that only he could see. It was not long before she found herself drawn to him in a way that was no longer merely observation. She had begun to see him in the village, his presence becoming more frequent, his movements more deliberate. He spoke little, his words measured and deliberate, yet there was something in his eyes that unsettled her, a depth of thought that unsettled her. And so she had followed himself, drawn to him in a way that was no longer merely observation. She had begun to see him in the village, his presence becoming more frequent, his bulk like his castus, hinted at a mind burdened by secrets. And yet, it was not his secrets that intrigued her, but the way he seemed to be drawn to her as well. She had caught him watching her more than once, his gaze lingering just a moment too long, as though he too felt the pull of an unseen force. She could not explain why she felt this way, why the mere sight of him sent a shiver through her, or why she found herself returning to the same places in the village where he had been. It was an obsession that had taken root in her without warning, and now it was growing, consuming her thoughts, her actions. She told herself that it was merely curiosity, that it was only natural for a reclusive woman to be drawn to the presence of another. But deep down, she knew the truth. It was more than that. It was something far more consuming, something that had already begun to take hold of her, and that she could not yet name. The weight of obsession. Eleanor had always prided herself on her ability to maintain control, to navigate the world with a quiet dignity that had long since become second nature. But now, as the days passed and the pull of Thomas Wren grew stronger, she found herself grappling with a force that defied her will. It was not merely a matter of interest or curiosity. It was something deeper, something that gnawed at the edges of her mind with an unrelenting persistence. She told herself that she was merely indulging in a harmless fascination, that the way he watched her was nothing more than a reflection of her own. But in the stillness of the manor, when the wind howled through the halls and the candlelight flickered in her bedroom, she could not ignore the truth. She was slipping The obsession had taken root in her with such quiet inevitability that she had not even realized it was happening until it was too late. It was in the way she found herself returning to the same places in the village, waiting for a glimpse of him, watching from the shadows as he passed through the narrow streets. It was in the way she studied him, noting the smallest details, the way his fingers curled around the handle of his coat, the way his gaze flickered toward the manor as though his too late. It was in the way she found herself returning to the same places in the fell that flickered. Her thoughts consumed her, the way she could not seem to escape the feeling that he was meant to be part of her life, that their fates were somehow intertwined. She told herself that it was only natural, that it was not unusual for a woman to be drawn to a man who carried the weight of secrets. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more she felt the walls of her own mind closing in. The obsession was no longer a mere distraction. It was a consuming force that had begun to shape her very existence. She could not eat without thinking of him, could not sleep without the feeling that he was watching her from the darkness. And yet, even as she succumbed to the pull of this strange and unrelenting force, she could not help but wonder if she was truly in love, or if she was merely being consumed by something far more dangerous. The village, too, seemed to sense the shift in her. The whispers had grown more frequent, the villagers watching her with a mixture of unease and curiosity. They spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with speculation, as though they, too, had noticed the change in her. Some said she had gone mad, that the solitude of the manor had finally driven her to the edge of reason. Others claimed that she had been waiting for something, that her obsession with Thomas Wren was no mere infatuation but something far more sinister. And yet, none of it mattered, not when the pull of Thomas Wren was stronger than ever, when the walls of the manor no longer felt like a refuge, but a prison from which she could not escape. The descent into investigation. Eleanor's obsession with Thomas Wren had become an all-consuming force, but it was not enough to simply watch him from the shadows. She needed answers that would explain the strange pull she felt, the way his presence seemed to resonate with something deep within her. And so, she began her search, her investigation, a slow and methodical unraveling of the man's life, his past, and the secrets that had long been buried beneath the surface of Blackmoor. She started with the village, speaking to the few who had known Thomas in his youth. The villagers were reluctant at first, their eyes wary as they avoided her gaze. But Eleanor was persistent, her questions measured yet insistent. She asked about his family, his childhood, the rumors that had followed him through the years. Some claimed he had once been a promising young man, a scholar who had left the village in pursuit of knowledge, only to return years later with a haunted look in his eyes. Others whispered of a scandal, a tragedy that had driven him to the fringes of society. But none could give her a clear answer, only fragments of information that hinted at something far more complex. Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor turned to the manor itself, seeking out the records that might hold the key to Thomas's past. The archives were vast, their shelves lined with brittle parchment and yellowed ledgers that spoke of a bygone era. She combed through them with meticulous care, her fingers tracing the inked lines as she searched for any mention of Thomas Wren. It was in an old ledger, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the library, that she found the first real clue. There was a name scrawled in the margins, a name that sent a chill through her, Eleanor, her own name. It was a name that had been written in the same hand that had penned the entry, but the date was decades old, long before she had arrived in Blackmoor. It was as though someone had known of her long before she had ever set foot in the village. The realization unsettled her, but she pressed on, determined to find more. Her search led her to the attic, where she pressed on, determined to find more. Her search led her to the attic, where she discovered a collection of library that she found the Fergos. Not decipher. The handwriting was elegant, the words filled with longing and desperation. One letter in particular caught her attention. It was written in a voice that was both tender and sorrowful, a voice that spoke of love, of a bond that had been broken. And at the end of the letter, there was a final line that sent a shiver down her spine. "I will never let you go, not even in death." The weight of the words pressed upon her, and for the first time, she felt the full force of the obsession that had taken hold of her. It was not merely a fascination with Thomas Wren. It was something far more consuming, something that had been waiting for her all along. But as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, so too did the shadows of her own mind. The more she searched, the more she found herself slipping into the depths of her own obsession, her thoughts consumed by the mystery that had begun to unfold. She could not stop, not when the truth was so close, not when the pull of Thomas Wren was stronger than ever. The confrontation. The night of the confrontation came without warning, as though the very air of Blackmoor had conspired to draw Eleanor and Thomas Wren together. It was a night thick with mist, the kind that clung to the earth like a shroud, obscuring the world in a haze of uncertainty. Eleanor stood at the edge of the manor's garden, her breath visible in the cold air, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come to this place not as a woman seeking answers, but as a woman possessed by something far greater than herself. The letters, the name, the whispers of the past, each had led her here, to this moment where the truth was waiting to be unearthed. Thomas Wren appeared as if summoned by the very force that had drawn her to him. He stepped from the shadows of the trees, his silhouette outlined against the pale glow of the moon. His eyes met hers, and for a moment neither spoke. There was something in his gaze that sent a shiver through her, something that was not merely recognition but understanding. It was as though he had known all along that this moment would come, that their fates were bound together in a way that neither could escape. "You've been searching for me," he said at last. His had led hers, and for a moment neither spoke. There was something in his gaze that sent a shiver through her, something that was not merely recognition but understanding. It was as though he had known all along that this moment would come. Voice low, measured. It was not a question but a statement, one that carried the weight of something unspoken. Eleanor did not answer immediately. Instead, she took a step forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You know why I came," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions that churned within her. "You know what I found." Thomas exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You found the truth," he said, "and now you want to know what it means." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Eleanor's fingers curled into her palms as she struggled to contain the rush of emotions that threatened to consume her. She had spent so long searching for answers, for the pieces of the puzzle that had eluded her. And now, standing before him, she felt. He said. She took a step forward, hers tongue. He was stubbly restless curm, the weight of the revelation pressing down upon her. "I want to know what you did," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What you've hidden from me." Thomas did not move. His expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that looked almost like regret. "You already know," he said. "You've always known." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected this. She had searched for the truth, for the answers that would explain the pull between them, the strange connection that had drawn her to him. But now, standing before him, she realized that the truth was not something that could be uncovered. It was something that had always been there, waiting for her to see it. "You were in love with me," she said. "You were in love with me." She had not expected this. She had not expected this. She had searched for the truth, for the answers that would explain the pull between them, the strange connection that had drawn her to him. Coming out as a realization rather than an accusation. "Before I ever came to Blackmoor, before I even knew your name." Thomas did not deny it. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment as though he were reliving something long buried. When he opened them again, there was something different in his gaze, something that looked almost like sorrow. "I never meant for you to find out," he said. "I thought I could forget you. I thought I could move on. But you came back, and I couldn't escape you." Eleanor felt something inside her break, something that had been holding her together for so long. She had spent years chasing this man, searching for the answers that had eluded her. And now, standing before him, she realized that the truth was not what she had expected. It was not a revelation of betrayal or deceit. It was something far more complex, something that had been waiting for her all along. "I can't let you go," she said, her voice trembling. "Not now, not ever." Thomas looked at her, and for the first time there was something in his expression that was not merely resignation, but something else, something that looked almost like hope. The aftermath of obsession. Eleanor stood in the flickering candlelight of the manor, her reflection staring back at her from the glass of the vanity. The mirror, once a symbol of vanity and self-reflection, now seemed to mock her, revealing the hollowness that had taken root within her. The confrontation with Thomas Wren had not brought her the clarity she had sought, nor had it ended the obsession that had consumed her. Instead, it had left her in a state of suspended disbelief, caught between the knowledge of the past and the weight of the present. She had spent years searching for him, believing that the answers she sought would bring her peace. But now, with the truth laid bare before her, she found herself adrift. The certainty she had once clung to slipping through her fingers like sand. The man who had haunted her thoughts, who had drawn her into the depths of obsession, was no longer a stranger. He had been a part of her life long before she had ever arrived in Blackmoor, before she had even known his name. And yet, the knowledge of this connection did not bring her comfort. It only deepened the ache that had taken root in her heart. The village, too, seemed to sense the change in her. The whispers that had once followed her through the streets had ceased, replaced by a silence that was more unsettling than the murmurs that had come before. The villagers, who had once watched her with wary eyes, now avoided her entirely, their gazes averted as if they, too, were afraid of what she had become. She had always been an enigma, a woman who had kept her distance, but now she was something else entirely, something that even the village could not explain. She moved through the manor like a ghost, her steps measured, her thoughts consumed by the weight of what had transpired. The letters, the name, the memories that had surfaced in the confrontation with Thomas Wren, all of it, had left an indelible mark upon her. She could not unsee what she had learned, could not undo the pull that had drawn her to him in the first place. And yet, she could not let go. The obsession had not been quenched, it had only changed. Where once she had searched for answers, now she was trapped in the knowledge of what had already been. She had thought that understanding would bring her peace, that the truth would release her from the grip of her own desires. But instead she found herself even more ensnared, the weight of the past pressing upon her like a shroud. She stood before the mirror once more, staring at her own reflection, and for the first time she saw the truth not in the eyes of Thomas Wren, but in her own. She had not been searching for him out of love. She had not been searching for him out of love. She had not been searching, had not been quenched. The obsession had not been quenched. The weight of the past pressing upon her like a shroud. The weight of the past pressing upon her like a shroud. Been searching for something far more elusive, something that had been waiting for her all along. And now, with the past laid bare before her, she was left with a question that had no answer. What would she do now that she had found him? The resolution of obsession. Eleanor stood at the edge of the manor's garden, the cold air biting at her skin as she gazed out at the village below. The mist had lifted, revealing the quiet streets and the distant outlines of the cottages that had once felt so foreign to her. The confrontation with Thomas Wren had left her in a state of suspended uncertainty, and though the weight of the past had been laid bare before her, she still did not know what to do. The obsession that had consumed her for so long had not been quenched. It had merely shifted, transformed into something more complex, more inescapable. She had spent years searching for Thomas, believing that the answers she sought would bring her peace. And yet, now that she had found him, she was left with a question that had no resolution. Was she still in love with him, or had the obsession simply been a reflection of something deeper, something that had always been there? The letters, the name, the whispers of the past, all of it had led her to this moment, but she was not certain if it had been fate or merely the result of a mind that had long been consumed by longing. Thomas had not left her. In fact, he had remained, standing at the threshold of the manor as though he too was uncertain of what came next. He had not spoken since their confrontation, his expression unreadable, his presence a silent question that she could not answer. And yet, she could not bring herself to move away from him, to turn her back on the man who had haunted her thoughts for so long. The village had changed in the wake of the revelation, though not in the way she had expected. The whispers had ceased, the villagers no longer watching her with wary eyes. Instead, there was a strange stillness, as though they, too, had come to understand the weight of what had transpired. Some had spoken of Eleanor in hushed tones, their words laced with something that was not quite pity, nor quite fear. Others had simply turned away, as if they, too, were afraid of what she had become. But Eleanor could not escape the pull of the past, nor could she ignore the truth that had been laid bare before her. She had spent so long searching for answers, believing that the mystery of Thomas Wren would bring her something: clarity, understanding, perhaps even love. But in the end, she had found only herself, staring back at her reflection in the mirror of the manor, the weight of her own obsession pressing upon her like a shroud. And yet, even as she stood there, she knew that the story of Eleanor and Thomas Wren was far from over. The past had not been erased, nor had the weight of their connection been undone. Instead, it had only deepened, leaving her with a question that would linger in the silence of the manor for years to come. Was the love she had felt for Thomas Wren truly love, or had it been nothing more than the illusion of a man who had once been a part of her life, a man who had never truly left her, even in death? As the wind howled through the trees, Eleanor turned away from the garden and stepped back into the manor, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the mystery of her obsession would never truly be resolved. The past had been uncovered, but the future remained uncertain, and in the end, that was the most haunting truth of all: the echoes of obsession. P.D. James's mastery of the mystery genre is evident in the intricate layers of this story, where the themes of love and obsession are not merely explored but woven into the very fabric of the narrative. Her style, characterized by a meticulous attention to detail and a psychological depth that delves into the human psyche, allows the reader to experience the protagonist's descent into obsession as a slow, inevitable unraveling. The setting of Blackmoor, with its shadowed manor and enigmatic villagers, serves as a metaphor for the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface of human relationships. The village itself becomes a character, its silence and secrets reflecting the internal turmoil of Eleanor as she grapples with her feelings for Thomas Wren. James's use of language is both elegant and precise, creating an atmosphere that is at once haunting and immersive. The descriptions of the mist-laden hills and the decaying manor are not merely setting pieces, they are imbued with a sense of foreboding, hinting at the darker emotions that lie beneath the surface. The protagonist's journey through the village, her interactions with the villagers, and her eventual confrontation with Thomas Wren all reflect the complexity of human desire and the destructive nature of obsession. James's ability to convey the subtleties of emotion, love, fear, longing, adds a layer of depth that transforms the story from a mere mystery into a profound exploration of the human condition. In this story, love is portrayed not as a singular defining emotion but as a multifaceted experience that can lead to both enlightenment and destruction. The protagonist's obsession with Thomas Wren is a testament to the power of love, but it is also a cautionary tale that illustrates the dangers of letting desire consume one's life. James's narrative invites the reader to reflect the complexity experience that can lead to both enlightenment and destruction. The protagonist's obsession with Thomas Wren is a heal or one that can ultimately lead to ruin. The lingering questions that arise from the story about the nature of love, the boundaries of obsession, and the consequences of unrequited desire echo the themes that have long defined James's work, making this story not only a compelling mystery, but also a poignant exploration of the human heart. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new stories when they become available. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me if you enjoyed the story and want to hear more like it.